News.
No,
It's crazy.
I gotta tell you, I question all that. I've written 3 books. You can see them behind me here on this
Yes.
deal from 2020, and I really question. I don't even know how you can make an assessment. My background was in auditing, and we can maybe get into that in a bit. But um, you can't. If you can't certify something, you can't really make an opinion on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And your elections are not certifiable.
Hi, this is Patrick Rooney, and I'm the founder of Old School. Old School is all about natural health, success, and freedom, and making all of those go in today's world. And today we have a special guest, Joe Hoft from the Gateway Pundit.com, also joehoft.com. And he fits right into this idea of freedom. There was an event recently in Oregon called the Make Oregon Great Again rally, which Joe and many other speakers were there. And the whole idea is in Oregon is a blue state, and we all know that. But I don't even know. I mean, I'm kind of, I'm thinking, Joe, already of we have, even the way that we vote in Oregon is pretty ridiculous. It's all mail-in ballot now. So the chances of making something happen in this election for Oregon, may not be that great, but we've got to do what we can. And we also have to affect the nation, and anything we can do in this election coming up is huge. Obviously it's a huge election. Anyway, I wasn't expecting to go all there first, Joe, but let me introduce you. And I don't know you well other than seeing you speak at the Make Oregon Great rally, and I really liked something about what you said. It was something about I know what you and your brother have done, Jim, are doing tremendous things at the Gateway Pundit. I'd love to kind of go into that a little bit, but also the way you spoke, I could tell that there was more to you. As important as the elections are, I could see that there's something more to you than that, and that's one of the reasons I brought you on as well. So without further ado, welcome, Joe Hoft.
Thank you, Patrick. Great to be here. And it was great being in Oregon. I think years ago I worked for Union Pacific Railroad for a short period of time, and they sent me out to the Tri-City area, as I recall. And so I think I maybe stepped in Oregon at that time, but hadn't been back. And
Tri-City would be Myrtle Creek, Canyonville. Am I saying the right Tri-Cities up here?
I think no. I think up by Washington, Idaho.
Oh, okay. That's a whole nother Tri-City area. Yeah.
And I think I may have stepped in Oregon at that time, but I don't recall. But anyways, so it's fun. Yeah.
It's a beautiful state. Unfortunately, it's gone the way many states have gone these days. It's gone blue. And it's become, the drugs have been pouring in here, and the homeless situation and the drug abuse. It's crazy.
I gotta tell you, I question all that. I've written 3 books. You can see them behind me here on this deal from 2020, and I really question. I don't even know how you can make an assessment. My background was in auditing, and we can maybe get into that in a bit. But you can't. If you can't certify something, you can't really make an opinion on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And your elections are not certifiable. I mean, they're all mail in. It's a scam to me. And so I don't know if the state's blue or not. I met a lot of great people. And it reminds me a lot of Iowa, where I grew up. I think I mentioned this before we started here. Just grew up in the small town Iowa, big family. My parents had 9 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, we were the second batch, me and my twin brother Jim. And
second batch.
Yeah.
I like the word batch.
Yeah, they had like 4 in a row, and then one a few years later, and then took like a 9-year time off, and then had 4 more in 4 years.
Went for it again.
Yeah. And so they had kids around that house for about 40 years,
Oh my God.
and uh, yeah, grew up in Iowa, loved it, felt real safe. It was a great place. My dad grew up on a farm. He was a big, strong guy, and my mother, they knew each other from high school years. They actually grew up near each other, and were married and have 9 kids. And they were, the typical, I think, American family. You work hard and you make a living. And the parents had 9 kids. We all went to the same parochial school, graduated from the same high school.
Interesting.
9 of us. And so they did that. And
did you guys go to Catholic school?
Yeah, it was a Catholic school.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. And it was a good school. It was a great school. Learned a lot. Had a lot of real, good friends, smart friends. We had a great time. We were, enjoyed sports and things like that. And it was free. I look back at those days. We lived across from the high school. So growing up, there was always a football field and a basketball court and baseball diamond. And we just spent a lot of time out on that field. My mom would even in the summer just say, if we were sitting around watching TV or something, she'd say, go outside and
right.
and get the boys outside to burn that energy. And we did that a lot, and we all really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we did that. Same thing. Sports are. When I dream a lot at nighttime, I'm dreaming of sports. Even though I don't play a lot of sports these days, I still dream of sports all the time.
Well, that's great. Where did you grow up then? In Oregon?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in near Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah, very hot. Remember the Valley Girls thing? Yeah. So that's the San Fernando Valley with the mall and all that. But it's a great place to grow up. Changed a lot. Obviously, immigration kind of did a lot of damage. Unchecked immigration.
Yeah.
But it was a nice place to grow up.
And even the small town I grew up in, about 30,000, Fort Dodge. My brother went back a few years back and said that church that we used to go to, well, they shut that church down, but that neighborhood, they were having one Spanish mass now in this small town. It was Caucasian growing up. There was a black neighborhood, and there wasn't many other minorities. It was just that was the way it was in Iowa, and we didn't care. Didn't think anything of it. Had most of the black kids went to the parochial or to the public school, so I didn't really get to know many, but knew a couple, and we just treated them like anybody else. It was just the way it was. Good people in Iowa, just like what I saw recently in Oregon. Just great people.
Yeah,
good American, God-loving people, and that's
and we grew up like that too. And it was people were people. Even in terms of people's politics and all that stuff. You didn't even really talk about that with your neighbors or your friends or anything. You just, you saw them as the friend or neighbor that they were. I think that's really a shame. That's what's happened. One of the things, that we kind of look at each other through the lens of what is their politics or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we've really it's one of those ways that we've broken away from each other. So hopefully we can solve that. But
maybe we can. Maybe we can, but our media to me is a really evil vehicle right now, and it just doesn't share the truth. And we saw it here in full exposure with the debate here recently, and then afterwards, all these media folks are like pretending like this was a shock that they didn't know.
Right.
And no, they just lie to us every day. And
I want
to,
I want to kind of get into that because you're talking about. With the mail-in balloting here, and I don't know how many states. Colorado has mail-in ballot too. I don't know how many states do, but obviously it's unfair. It's a joke. And we don't really know what like you said, we don't know what the real makeup of America is. We don't know how blue or red. We do know county by county. We know it's very red, right? All over this country.
Right.
But we don't really know what it really is. And I kind of wanted to drill down on that. How did you and I was curious how you and your brother Jim, how did you go about starting the Gateway Pundit?
Let's jump into that. So we grew up in Iowa. Jim moved down to St. Louis after college. We had an older brother there, and then I moved down there a short time later. after I graduated from college, went to Iowa State and got an MBA there. Then I came down to St. Louis. So, and we had another brother there then too. So, 3 of my brothers were there with me in St. Louis area for a period of time. And that was nice. And, that's kind of where I started my career. Jim as well. And about the year 2000, Jim, one day I went over to his house and he had this big bass in his living room, those don't kind of basses.
Yeah.
And like, what's that? Jim said, I'm going to start doing the bass. He's going to start taking lessons and stuff. I'm like, well, there you go. And something he hadn't done before. And so that was interesting. A short time later is when he started his blog. So he'd heard about blog, decided to start writing. And I'll tell you, the success story there is he just did it every day. It's the typical success in America. Do it every day.
Yeah.
Find something you enjoy. So it's not a task so much. It's a privilege or an honor, and it's fun. And so he would write stories, and he started off kind of more internationally. He'd find these stories overseas. It's about 2003, 4. We both felt like George Bush was getting the shaft in what was really happening overseas. And through some articles he would find overseas, he'd write about them. And then what he did is he started sharing with these other websites that were out there. Now, there wasn't many in early 2000. Remember, Facebook wasn't there. Twitter wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was the internet. Drudge Report was picking up steam. And there was a couple other websites. Michelle Malkin had a couple big ones. I think Hot Air was hers.
Hotair.com originally was hers. I think, yeah.
And there was another Pundit. Had a big site. And Jim would send him his stories. He followed those guys, so he'd send him his story. And one day, one of them linked to his story, shared it, and linked to Jim's story. And so Jim was thrilled. And then that happened more and more. And then what happened eventually is they would just go to Jim's site to see if there's a story there, and they'd put it up on their site. That was awesome. He didn't even have to send it to him. And then what would happen?
Did he start as a political blogger or any
more? Yeah, like I said, it was more international because he found a niche there that nobody else was really reporting the stuff he was reporting. And there wasn't many websites out there, but then again, there wasn't a lot of people on the net yet.
True.
You remember You've Got Mail and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was about that time, really. And so he started that, and even then you thought, oh, it's probably too late to start a website, but no, it wasn't. No, and he had good articles, did it every day, and built this relationship with some of these other sites. They would link to him, and eventually people started going to Jim's site. That took a period of time, maybe 10 years. At the same time Jim was working, same time I'm working, I was in the corporate area, and around the year 2000, I got a position with this multinational, and I have a background in finance and auditing. And it was in the auditing shop, and this company was growing, and I was able to start flying around the world on behalf of the audit committee and visit these sites and audit them to see if they were, what was going on, and feed that information back to the States. And really was awesome because the industry I was in, it was all these great locations around the globe. And we'd put these offices smack dab in the middle of the financial district, and it was really fun. I got to travel started with throughout the U.S., then Canada, then the U.K., and then Europe, and then South Africa, then throughout Asia, South America. I got to see the world, and I'm doing that at the same time Jim is actually building his website.
And you're auditing like their business information, right?
Pretty much operations, financials, not to sign off on. I wouldn't sign off on the financials at that time, but I would more look at their operations, make sure they had a going concern, that everything was working properly, that and that we would spend some time on the financials, but make sure that those processes that supported those financials were working as intended too. So I learned a lot traveling the world, looking at some of these various sizes of these businesses we had. Some were startups with maybe 5-10 people. Others reached the size of an office we had in Hong Kong, which has about 300 or so people. So,
you were always interested in that kind of work?
I've always been great with numbers. I'd say Jim has been too, but that's kind of how I fell in and got my CPA. and then I earned like a total of 10 degrees of designations, and that really helped me move up through the corporation, get this position traveling the world. And then I took a position actually in finance where I oversaw a $1 billion block of business. And that was a big deal. It was in Asia. It was Asia Pacific. It was really complex, all sorts of stuff going on. We had business in multiple countries, currencies, languages. It was a monster to get your hands around. My job was to sign off and hit that button at the end of a period and say everything's fine. And it was a stressful job. I did that about 4 years, learned a lot.
Sounds like you enjoyed it a lot too, even though it's stressful.
Well, I did. Although my buddies are saying, Joe, you got to get another job. You're working too much. We don't even see you. And I was working all weekends and stuff. And then I got this opportunity to move to Hong Kong and set up an audit shop for this multinational. And I did that. And my wife was Chinese, so she is Chinese. And so she was thrilled. And so we moved to, I'd met her on a business trip through Asia, and we got married. And so she was happy to go back home. She was from China, and now we're moving to Hong Kong. It was great. And I spent about 10 years there, and it was fantastic. I was an executive there.
It looks like a beautiful place. Every time I see it on the internet or something, I thought, this is amazing.
It really is. If you ever get a chance, there's a couple cities in Asia that are just spectacular. Hong Kong was one. Nice thing about Hong Kong, you get around pretty well with English. It's nice having somebody that knows either Mandarin or Cantonese, but for me, that really saved me. But still, you can get around. A lot of people know English. A lot of expats there. It was a really cool place. And then Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore.
I've never been to any of Asia at all. Just, I don't want to take off too far, but when you mention Hong Kong, I think of, the China wanting to encircle and take them over. I'm sure that's on your guys' mind a lot.
Well, I'd say they pretty much did that. So what happened in 97, Britain was running Hong Kong, and then they let it go and handed it over to China. It was supposed to be 50 years before China would intervene, but they started right away. So when I got there, they had already taken over mainly the city. The city country is they have a CEO. It's their president, and that individual had to be vetted by China first. So they'd already changed that. And then they changed it. The upper house was all Chinese, and then pro-China. And then there was an election when I was there in 2019, and the lower house got like 95%, anti-Chinese winners. And then, so what they did is they just changed the law. The lower house was just given no power. And then came COVID, and then they just took it over. Now it's really everything there. I think it's really now pretty much per China. I think they tried to stay out a little bit, but they changed the law there. You can't say anything about China or report anything, or you could be shipped to China. And they've actually done that, even to some Westerners, shipped them to China because they're reporting. And so there's maybe mark that note, because that really has a significant piece in my story and Jim's.
Well, it sounds like they've overtaken the country without having to fire a shot so far.
Pretty much.
Right.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And is the leader of Hong Kong, is it someone that the communist Chinese have basically is in their pocket? Yeah. And,
it's a prestigious job. It's usually somebody pretty prestigious, but they've got ties all over the place to China. So it's, that's who's running China now.
Why would they need to have a military takeover if they've already taken it over then?
I don't think they have to. They do have military there now, though. I mean, China has some big presence there now. They do have military there. It's pretty much China now. So my story then was, I'm working for this corporation. I'm traveling throughout Asia, traveling back and forth with the U.S., going in front of audit committees, going in front of boards, visiting locations, doing a lot of audits, running audits, doing audits, all types of audits. My background, I in IT, in finance, and operations. Just did a lot and learned a lot, and it was great.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this in that talk that I gave in Oregon a few weeks ago, was that I had a 20-year anniversary in July of 2019. And the place that I worked at invited me into the break room, and there was this big surprise party for me. And again, about 300 people there, 300. And it was really neat. They said the reason we're here is because Joe's got 20 years. Now, the office was barely 20 years old, so there wasn't maybe anybody there other than the guy who introduced me, who'd been around the company 20 years, you know? Yeah. So it was pretty neat. And they said real nice things and said, you know, Joe, people here aren't ever going to get to the U.S., many of us, but they base it on what they see on TV, whatever, and people they meet. And you've been a great role model for all these people, he says. And then he, at the end of this, shares that he loves, you know, that we love you, Joe. And who says that, you know, in a corporate setting?
Right.
It was wonderful. And then the COO got up, and I was close to both these guys. I'm in meetings with them a lot. And he said, base the same thing. And we love you, Joe. And it was fantastic. And then after, you'll see behind me here, there's a picture of me shaking Trump's hand.
I see that.
They actually gave that to me that day. It says 20 up there. It's 20th year anniversary. And what it was is they all knew I loved Trump. They took a picture of she shaking Trump's hand and superimposed my head over she's body. And the place just rolled when they did that. It was just,
that's hilarious.
It was a great time. It was a really special day for me. And what a blessing that was, because 8 months later, I ended up leaving Hong Kong. And I'll tell you about that. But first, I should probably jump back and say in 2016 is when I really kind of started working with Jim at Gateway Pundit. Jim has continued to do this every day. He's gotten some great success through a couple big stories. And by 2016, it was really Jim, still just Jim, sitting in his office. And then we talked every day, and I started writing for him, and I had some great success right away with a couple big stories. And back then, Drudge Report was king. If you get a link you get a link to Drudge, it would shoot massive traffic to your site. And so that was always a big prize. And everybody was going for it. I'm telling you, you know, Washington Post, everybody wanted to be on Drudge then. And he was a fan of Trump's, and we were dropping just bombs. And one day I told Jim, I think Ted Cruz can be done by the end of the month, here's the day. Jim asked me to write it up, and then Drudge put it up. And then sure enough, a month later, I nailed it to the day. Almost.
How did you know that?
Well, I could tell the states that were coming up. I could see where Cruz was. There was one side thing would tell you where he's at. And I just kind of took an average and even said, okay, let's just even be conservative and give him this many delegates per state, which I don't think he's going to get. And what happened is I ended up being, you know, not perfect,
real close, right?
Real close. And Drudge put it up 2 days in a row. I had the top story at Drudge.
That's great.
And I'm an executive in Hong Kong. I'm like, man, I'm more excited about this than anything I've been
that's funny,
work-wise in a long time.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And you guys were you and your brother were both interested in politics all the way as growing up too, or when did that start to happen where you got more into
probably
politics?
The mid-90s, maybe through some friends or whatever, became more staunch at that time conservatives. And then we saw Bush. We didn't like what was happening to him, the negative press, which was terrible. And he had no way answer to it either.
Yeah.
And then we saw Obama, and that was terrible. And but the Tea Party movement, Jim was a big part of. And then, my job was, I was over here traveling the world. Jim's over here building the Gateway Pundit. 2016, I had some success. Then I started writing for him. Every day I tried to put up one article. A lot of it had to do with numbers or financials, because that kind of was my wheelhouse.
That's cool. Yeah. You could bring that into it. And you and your brother always got along well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we were best friends. Even in Hong Kong, I'm calling him almost every day. We're twins. We're identical twins.
Oh, okay, identical twins.
And so what happened then is I did write for him about every day, once an article a day. Trump wins. We were both just thrilled when he won. Yeah. We had no idea the nightmare that was ahead, and with the Mueller exam and Obama and what these people did to Trump was it's just so criminal. And they've to date's gotten away with it. And I did a lot of writing at that point then about that Mueller gang. So my background, as I mentioned, was like auditing. If you do an audit and you've got a conflict of interest, you can't do it. If you're assigned to it, you've got to say, I recuse myself. And we did that. In the corporate world, you do that. And if you're signing off on the financials for a corporation as an independent auditor, your wife better not be working at that company. Right. You can't have even the appearance.
Right.
They say that. So this is what really shocked me at the beginning of that Mueller exam was these guys are all tied to Hillary and the Democrats. They hate Trump. Look at the things they've written.
Yeah.
That would have been enough in the corporate world to recuse.
Sure.
And you would have been mandated to be recused. And yet I'm seeing these guys all put together on this team against Trump. I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. And really hammered that. And then I started hammering Mueller. Mueller was a good friend of Comey's. What's he doing in this thing? And so
the media is so obviously so biased anyway. Yeah. So, and they are the way that the public gets the information. Yeah. So they're able to control that.
Oh, and didn't they? It was toxic what they were doing.
Yeah.
We saw bias under Bush. We saw bias under Obama. This guy he could do no wrong for this media. They would never scold him for anything for 8 years. But he still wasn't popular because his policies were horrible. Really, quite frankly, that was the beginning of the destruction of America, bringing in these sanctuary cities and giving billions to Iran. It just, none of that made sense to me.
Well, don't you think that even today, I mean, most people can see that Joe isn't in charge, obviously.
Yeah.
Somebody is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure Obama's got a number one influencer for sure. So when you see some of this stuff like Obama, even somebody shared with me, I've got a show daily. It's from 1 to 2 Eastern on Frank's speech. I had Liz Harrington on my show today, who's worked with the Trump team and done a lot of great things. She said even how Obama came over months ago to the White House to meet with Joe to talk to him about stepping down. I'm like, Obama's there every day. We all know it.
I saw something in today's news that 3 of Obama's young guys that are really I think might have even seen it on your site or somewhere I saw it. 3 of these guys that were John Favreau and these different young guys that are all Obama guys. They all came out at once on a podcast. I think it was yesterday, and just threw Joe over the rails. So obviously that's Obama doing that, but he doesn't say anything in public. So he looks like the nice guy.
Sure. Yeah. And then yesterday we saw all Congress come out and get behind Joe. It's like, what a joke. This guy, he's a nightmare. We all know it. The good news was in that debate, we all really, really saw it. And these people could pretend like they were shocked, but they're back to normal now. They're all behind Joe. So,
do you think that they're, I mean, you know the inside of what's going on as well as anybody. Do you think they're really going to run him again or run Michelle or somebody else instead?
Well, Liz Harrington was just on my show. She thinks he's going to be gone soon and they'll bring somebody else in. And
it looks like they're just tossing him overboard day by day right now.
Yeah, maybe. But then again, you don't know. I mean, and my theory is they could run a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
That's what I want to get into with you.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of fill you in just finish this story.
Sure. Go ahead.
Age and how I ended up coming home. So I'm writing for Jim every day. Then COVID comes and I start writing about that. And then one day they say, hey, it's 3.4% mortality. We're all going to die. Now for me, Hong Kong was hit first. We were shut down in early January.
Yeah.
And anyways, so I looked at those numbers that the WHO was putting out, and I said, that's not right. I could compare it to the U.S. numbers for the flu. And I said, this thing's just, it's the way they're doing it. The numbers look similar to the flu. It's not going to be that bad. I put that up the next day. Alex Jones had Jim and I on because I'm the only guy saying this, and I'm over in Hong Kong. And another guy was there before me saying, oh, we're all going to die. And then Alex Jones brings me in and I'm saying, no, I look at these numbers. It's going to be closer to the flu. And the next day I got doxxed by Media Matters. And they said, Joe Hoft, who works at this company in Hong Kong, wrote this piece. And even though everybody knew I was a Trump fan and that they knew I was writing with Jim, it caused some challenges. And so after 20 years, I ended up retiring and coming back to the States in 2020. It was an early retirement though, because Media Matters. For a couple of years, I never shared that because I didn't want them to have the satisfaction of knowing that their attack, hurt me.
And they can get away with it too.
Yeah, it's so sinister, so sick. It's the same group now Elon Musk is suing, and I'm glad he is. This group, its whole purpose has been to just hurt people or corporations or conservatives. Yeah. And that's the thing and thank God Elon's doing this because he's the first one. The Republican Party, who we thought was standing up for us, just doesn't do that. There's no pushback on any of this.
Anything.
And we're seeing, maybe that's the word uniparty came up over this last couple of years. And it's like, absolutely.
One other thing on this China, when you saw the numbers from, that COVID wasn't going to be what they said, was that was some of that, a lot of that a put on? We saw a lot of videos in the beginning days of COVID. Was a lot of that just put on videos of people dropping in the streets and all that?
Yeah, remember that everybody can see that picture. That Chinese man just drops in the street and stays dead. And then, the furnaces are on fire. They're burning bodies. I think some people did die, but no, that was all a scam. It was what they had to do is instill fear.
Yeah.
And the fear that you're going to die is maybe the greatest fear. And so this 3.4%, I mean, that's 3 people out of 100. It was scaring people really bad because that was more than the Spanish flu. And then I come out and say, no, I get hit hard. I get hit hard on another post a few months later when I wrote that it's only 6% of the people that are dying are actually dying from only COVID. The rest of these people have had, they could be a motorcycle crash, but they find COVID. So I got like 10 fact checkers hit me. So what hits me later, sometime later, is they attack me for the posts where I'm saying my narrative, which is based on fact and numbers, was that this isn't as bad as they're saying. They couldn't have that narrative out there. They had to attack that to get the fear, to get people to change, to get people to do whatever they wanted.
That's right.
And so that's why it was so heavily attacked and so badly censored.
How did you deal with that kind of attack? Was it something you weren't used to, probably? So how did you?
In the corporate world, you know?
Right.
And as a matter of fact, in the corporate world, I believe you're pretty much rewarded for the truth.
Yeah. Right.
And in this environment, it was the opposite. So it was pretty sinister. And I've seen it with Jim, though. We ended up having what was I going to say? Tremendous success. Jim took on CNN and all these sites, got as many hits and Facebook shares and stuff as some of these major news networks. And what happened was after that in 2017, they just cut down. They censored the heck out of Gateway Pundit and the top 10 sites, and they lost 95. I did a study for Jim. We had the data. They lost 95% of their volume.
Really?
Gateway Pundit did as well. From 2016 to 2017. And then you'd see Zuckerbucks go in front of the Congress and say, oh, no, we don't censor conservatives. It was a lie. They were censoring Gateway Pundit drastically. So I've seen this move and this censorship complex really take off after 2016, even before the election some, but the hammer came down after that. So by the time the 2020 election comes along, the censorship's in full force, and that was in my first book, both with the media and big tech. You were lucky to get a story out that was going to be shared. And I'm already facing it right now. I'll tell you what, I had somebody today send me a Norton antivirus software. They tried to share a link from joehoft.com. And this lady says, look at this. They're saying warning on this site. They're
wow.
And then I'm also seeing Facebook already censoring my stories. So they're doing it. They're going to do it as bad and as worse as ever. Yeah, at joehoft.com, you can see my stories. And if you try to share it, maybe you'll get the same experience. It's just sinister what they're doing. This is full communism and tyranny. So I looked at doing before we got on and did the show, I looked at, curious, so what would, if I pulled up online, if I pulled up
Joe Hoft. I pulled up the Gateway Pundit. I pulled up
Mm,
whatever. I fully expected to see slams, right?
yeah.
But I looked and Wikipedia is kind of probably, probably as well
Yeah.
as anybody, that they're not a fair-minded
No, it's terrible.
in there, and they actually just slammed you. I mean, they didn't even try to make it look like they were being fair.
Was it Gateway Pundit or Joe Hoft?
Well, actually, it was the Gateway Pundit.
Yeah, it's just
They said
terrible.
the Gateway
Terrible.
Pundit is an American far right
Yeah.
fake news
Yeah.
website known for publishing falsehoods, hoaxes, and conspiracy theories. It's like
That's
they didn't even pretend to come into that.
Jim has
Barely.
been fighting that for 4 or 5 years. He'd send them, he'd get things, and the next day it'd be back up.
Yeah.
And it's just a never ending. It's just it's disgusting. I mean, Wikipedia is really, really far left, and
It really
that's
shows
just
what
kind
kind
of
of
lies.
it really shows what kind of stranglehold these people have over the media.
Oh,
I mean, look at Facebook, look at
yeah.
YouTube. I mean, I've had early on in COVID, I did some pieces where I was covering Dr. Zelenko, for instance, and what he was doing with his cocktail that was saving so many lives.
Yeah.
And they've gone and pulled some of my videos off. Even now, 4 years later, they're still pulling videos off.
Isn't that something? It's toxic.
They're trying to rewrite history.
Well, they are. And the good news, here's the good news. And I've shared this before. I shared it today with Liz Harrington. And I think I've told her this before. A year ago, there was a poll at Rasmussen, I think a reputable polling place, and they said 62% of Americans believe the election was stolen.
Yeah.
2020. And another poll about the same time, 65% of Americans believe January 6th was a setup. And now recently, they're even more than 70% of Americans believe we were in a police state. So we're winning. We're winning
in that sense, right?
They can't stop this. They're trying, and they've got the mainstream media, but that's really what they learned in 2016. They had old legacy media, and then all of a sudden, Gateway Pundit and Breitbart and all these other news sites, the new media came in and beat them.
Yes.
And laughed at them. When CNN would put a post up, big media would share it because we'd laugh at it, how stupid they were. Yeah. And that's when Barack Obama, after that election, he goes straight to Silicon Valley and tells these people, you've got to change this because this isn't working. And so, as we know, we have this industrial complex now against conservatives, but we're still winning. We're just still winning.
That is heartening, for sure. Now, you wrote the book. Well, you wrote 3 books: The Steal, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. I have even friends of mine. So I have some friends who are not conservative, and which is okay. But I have friends. One of my friends continues to say, "Oh, what proof do you have?" And no judges have ruled in Trump's favor. How do you answer that? And I know that's probably one of the reasons you wrote these books, right?
Yeah. Well, and so my background, and I try to mention this. I throw this out there because, well, maybe two things I tried to share, like in Oregon, and if I'm talking about this story. One is trust your senses. Don't let these liars tell you that what you're seeing is not true. You can see with your own eyes.
We saw it in real time on election night.
Amen. We saw it. We saw it when they kicked people out of the room in Georgia, and they said on air, they said, we're sending everybody home. There's a water main break. Jim and I were like, oh, here we go. And then, we stayed up, and then the next morning we find out that, Michigan and Pennsylvania, well, not yet Pennsylvania, but Michigan, Wisconsin had flipped, totally flipped. Hundreds of thousands of votes only for Biden. What's
it's
going
impossible.
on?
It can't.
Of course it was. And we can't, even then I remember having some hope, like, well, this is going to get fixed, but that's repulsive what they're doing. And then we heard Robin Voss at Michigan, the Republican speaker, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And we found out he's part of the problem. Yeah. And so it was
many
really
of them
devastating.
So many of them are part of the problem, aren't they?
Yeah. But in answer to that question, by the way, Roger Stone has said, if anybody says that to me, I get him copies of your books, Joe, because he's actually called them. He said, these are going to go down as classics because you've laid out what happened in 2020. And I'm proud of that. Rudy Giuliani as well has given me some great compliments. And actually President Trump on my first book gave me a great compliment, and I note that both in my second and third volumes for sure.
That's really
so.
Cool.
You
and
know,
you get those at joehoft.com. Is that right?
Well, you can, and they're eventually through Amazon. I put them up on
so you
Amazon.
Get it there or joehoft.com.
Actually, and had Amazon. A group from Italy just translate them, and it's being sold in Italian now too. There's a site in Italy that's sharing it. So
it's nice that you put these things out there and have them. I know they're well researched.
Well, thanks. Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm not. And if I find out that I've said something that's bogus, then we're going to make some adjustments here. I'm not going to let that sit.
Right.
Similar with my experience in, overseeing financials. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be. And that's a hellacious stress for $1 billion block of business, but that's just the way it is. This is how things work. Now, that mentality and that rigorousness is not in place in our elections. So really the first thing is it's not even the same. And that's probably where I've kind of over the last few years just kind of been, well, wait a minute. In corporate, we had to do this. Over here, we don't have to. So for example, and I've shared this, I've never been at an audit in any country where I've asked for something. They said, no, you can't have it. Never. Not in Chinese, not in Japanese, not in Spanish, not in any language. As somebody said to me, no, you can't have it. At our corporation, you signed a code of conduct document. Everybody did that said, hey, if an auditor asks for something, you give it to them. And that's how you ensure that things are on the up and up. They're paying a lot of money, corporations, for auditors, both internal auditors and external auditors, to make sure things are on the up and up.
So in the political world, though, it's very common to not get the information when you try to get the audit.
And so that's kind of what hit me after the election. And even sometime after that, I revisited this tweet by Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy brilliant guy. Never know who he was until 2016 when he jumped behind Trump, and we're like, this guy is brilliant. And he is, and he still is. And he said a month after the election, he put out this tweet where he says, don't fool yourself. When the election was over, when they forcefully prevented us from seeing basically what's going on.
Right.
And he was talking about Detroit. When observers there were kicked out, the whole room would cheer as they kicked these people out for just challenging what was going on. They were abused all day, and eventually most all of them were gone. We couldn't see what was going on. That's where they put the pizza boxes up on the windows. That's where the van showed up underneath the center in the middle of the night, and like 5 people had affidavits on that, and they neglected to even address that. And so that was bad. I think Philadelphia was the worst, though. And I'll give you a story here, and I could give these kind of stories to your friends all day long.
Yeah.
But in Pennsylvania, after the election, remember, you couldn't go into Philadelphia. Nobody was allowed in there other than the Democrats, right? And for 3 days, they just basically, I think, manufactured ballots. And eventually, after 3 days, they say, similar to Georgia, they say, oh, Joe Biden won. You're like, no, Joe, what do you mean? Trump on election day was up 2 million to 1 million in Pennsylvania. He crushed it. In some of these counties, he won like maybe up to 90% of the vote. I mean, he crushed it.
Really?
Except for there was 2
90%,
90%, 80%, huge numbers. 2 to 1. He's overall, even counting Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, he's at 2 million to 1. That's 2/3. That's 66 to 33 overall with these, to me, manufactured numbers out of those 2 big cities, which are notorious for 100% voter turnout, which is a lie. These districts that get 100%
can't get it.
Well, they you drive through them and the buildings are all burnt down. Jim and I just did that in St. Louis recently.
Really?
We were driving from the city center to the airport, cut through the city, and it's block after block after block of buildings that are boarded up or burnt down or both. And you're telling us that those same districts are getting 100% voter turnout?
It's impossible.
Garbage.
Yeah.
That's why when you say Oregon's blue, I say garbage.
Right.
I don't believe it until I see it. There's the evidence to me right now says that I cannot make a determination on whether Oregon is blue or not. And same with the 2020 election. That was my end result in the auditing world. If I am prevented from seeing the evidence like they were in Philadelphia.
Right.
And by the way, a really sharp guy reached out to me. And this is what started happening. These smart people started reaching out. Joe, look at this. And I'm putting these posts up daily at the Gateway Pundit. We got up to 5 million hits a day after that election because we were dropping bombs. But this is one sharp guy, an actuary at a major U.S. corporation, goes, look at this. Trump's up 2-1 in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania on election day. 2-1. All of a sudden, they start counting these absentee ballots, and suddenly Trump loses to Biden on absentee. And remember, they made up the lie ahead of time. Well, Democrats would vote absentee. There was no evidence for that ever. There's nothing to support that statement.
Well, haven't absentee been traditionally more military people who are more conservative?
That's true. That's a great argument. There was no evidence for anybody to say that other than that they were preparing people for the eventual steal. And so what happens is this guy, this actuary, really smart guy, looks at the numbers and he says, look at this, Joe. In the mail-in ballots, there's a line. There's a line. There's a pattern that shouldn't be there. And for an auditor, that's like, and for anybody, it's like, that doesn't make sense. You know, it's just common sense is all auditing is common sense. You do it a lot, you kind of know what to do and look for, but it's all common sense. So what this guy shows me is that in the counties where Trump won 80%, he'd only win 40% of the mail-in vote, meaning Biden won 60 to 40. If Trump won 60% of the ballot on the election day, well, then he only earned 20% of the mail-in ballot. Across the board, if you subtracted 40% of the turnout from election day and put that into the turnout for the mail-in ballots, you had your answer. And so the numbers had to be manipulated and pushed out to all these counties in a pattern that they knew would give Joe Biden the win.
Right.
And that's what happened. We've got the evidence. And we started seeing this didn't come from a dummy. This came from one of the smartest guys that you can imagine, a number guru. This guy knows what he's talking about. And we got the evidence. It's right there because Pennsylvania had provided both numbers by county in both mail-in and election day results.
And that's in your book. Those are
in the book. And we had a lot of these things like that. It's like, this proves to me as an auditor that there's a pattern here that doesn't make sense. And it goes opposite as well. If there's not a pattern that should be there, you'd also be questioning things. But in this case, there's a pattern. Now, what we also know, though, already is what Scott Adams had already said, which he said that Scott Adams says, sorry if you hear any background noise. Scott Adams says that the election was over when we were prevented from seeing this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It was over. And he's right. And so that's the answer. If I'm being told as an auditor that I can't look at this stuff, I'm done.
Kind of all you need to know, right?
That's it. Okay, fine. Okay. And then I say, okay, fine. And move on and just say, I can't give an opinion.
That's right.
In this area, for all these absentee ballots, I can't give an opinion.
That's right.
So that's the answer to our friends too.
That's right. Yeah.
You can't prove either way who won that election, because this block of ballots, almost 2 million in Pennsylvania, they're not valid.
But so you have a lot of circumstantial evidence that you can see who won, right? In a way, if the evidence is everything has been kind of doctored in the direction of Joe Biden.
Well, then and that's a great point, Patrick. The evidence always was doctored to benefit Biden. I don't think that I've seen one single bit of evidence from 2020 where it looked like something was doctored that it went towards Trump.
Right. That tells you all you need.
Not one.
All you need to know. What about the machines? How much of that was shown to be doctored?
True or false? Well, I tell you what, here's what so I think perhaps they use the machines to manufacture these results that they did. Because maybe it's easier that way. At least you can come up with a number and then you just backfill with ballots. Which is what I think basically was done. Or they didn't even backfill with ballots. They just said, trust us, and nobody ever checked. Or if they tried to check, it's like Georgia right now, where there's 150,000 ballots that we can't get our hands on and haven't been able to now for 3.5 years, because the people that saw them in the recount said they're all carbon copies. So we can't even look at those yet. And that's going on. And for months, it went to the Supreme Court of Georgia. They pushed it down, and we still can't get them. So this is,
I have to ask, where is the law? Where is the Supreme Court? Where are the Republican Party? Where are these people?
Well, you're right. And talking to Liz Harrington today, she said something too. It's like, hey, Supreme Court just comes out and says, okay, all these January 6 guys that they've put, that they've thrown in prison, or some that are still in jail based on this one law. Supreme Court says, no, you can't. That's not the law. That you're using a regulation that isn't built for this. You've thrown these. You've said this felony. These people committed felonies and obstructed justice based on this reg that has nothing to do with what you're even saying. So they threw it out. They said you cannot do that. So what's the Supreme Court doing? Or the Supreme Court's done. What are they doing? What's the DOJ?
Right.
They're not letting them go.
Well, we know the
People
DOJ
are sitting in prison.
We can't expect the DOJ because they're corrupt, but Democrats, but they're on the same side. But where is, quote unquote, our side? Where's the Republican Party? Where are the judges? Trump put a lot of judges in, right?
Well, DC, I don't know if people really know this. Barack Obama, one thing he did when he was president, he took over that DC court. He added 10 Obama judges to it, and it's just been filth ever since. These people aren't judges. I don't believe in. I maybe show my bias here, but I've just seen enough of these Obama judges that I'm thinking they shouldn't be judges. They're not fair.
When I see Barack Obama, I see a very intelligent man. And I see a man who's obviously pulling the strings behind this administration. And everybody, it seems I'm surprised that more people just don't see that they are purposely destroying the United States of America. It's so obvious.
Yeah, you're so right. I couldn't agree with you more. And he has been given a clean pass. There's just
nobody touches the guy. It's like a crime family guy who has some kind of untouchable.
That's right. They talk about Teflon Don, like Trump's
nothing compared to Barack Obama.
Trump is getting hammered every day. The reason he gets off is because he's an innocent man. He's a good man.
What you brought up J6, January 6th. That's another one that just leaves me shaking my head. I mean, these people have been, some of them, obviously, if somebody was violent and doing something wrong, fine. Okay, go after them. But so many of these people have been found now with the video that's come out. People that just walked in the door, that were led in the door, that were
walking around,
drawn in. You can call it a honeypot or whatever you want to call it. But it's so obvious that there's so many people who are rotting in DC or jails all over the United States who have no business being there.
That's so true. There's a couple of them real sinister acts against some of these guys. One guy was down here in Florida. Jeremy, I forgot his last name. Jeremy Brown, is it? The guy that the FBI show up to his house before January 6th.
Jeremy Brown.
He tapes it, releases it after January 6th. So what do? They come, I believe they set him up. Yeah. And he's in prison now for multiple years. And his sin was that he told on the FBI.
Yeah.
And that's it. And what about, do you know about the Roseanne Boylan story? Do you know much about that?
I've heard of her name, but I don't know her story.
I think that story says something too, that's just so sad. It's a sad, right now we're living in a sad period in U.S. history. It's a lot of corruption, a lot of destruction of this country, and we have to stand up or we are going to lose this country, and we aren't far. The DOJ has been taken over and everything else. So Roseanne Boylan is this lady, middle-aged, maybe in her 30s, maybe, and kind of a hefty girl. was in recovery. She was a drug addict, found recovery, and then found herself helping others find recovery as she became a counselor at one of these centers and had been there for 7 years and helped a lot of people. She had a great relationship with her father. They'd go fishing and she turned into this wonderful person and helped a lot of people. Well, the day of the January 6th, she drove up there with a friend and got caught in this area where the people outside were pushing, and the cops all of a sudden just pushed all these people, just stormed all these people, and they fell backwards on top of each other. Roseanne found herself on the bottom of this mush pile, basically. And if you remember mush pile from a kid, sometimes, or in a football game or something, you can't breathe down.
Oh, that's a scary place to be,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, she was down there, and at the same time, they're spraying these people with some substance. We don't even know what it is, and at least I don't. And they ended up. She got caught under there, and then her body was pulled out. And there's this black woman, a police woman, that had a baton that beat her like 50 times. It's on video. Beat her 50 times. She's not moving. Beat her. And to the point where she lost her baton. She hit her so hard that the baton went flying. And at the same time, you have these guys, men like you and me, that are there that are saying, stop, you're killing her. Yeah. You are killing her. And I've talked to a couple guys that were in that vicinity. Well, and when you see pictures of January 6th, it's this area there near this doorway where these people are getting smothered, and people started throwing things at the cops. Stop, you're killing them.
Oh,
and they're throwing stuff. So that's the picture they bring up to say, oh, look how mean and evil and bad these Trump supporters were. These were men. There was one guy that was a sheriff in Tennessee. He's there. He eventually gets Roseanne's body, pulls her off, tries to do CPR on her, and it's not working. He's now in prison for doing that. Another guy I talked to was begging the cops. He said, I got down on my knees. I gave up all my dignity. I said, please stop. She's dying. And they didn't stop. He turned around. The cop cracked him on the back of the head, and he had blood running down the back of his shirt. And this is what these guys, and a number of these guys have been thrown in prison.
Wow.
But let me just finish this story because it'll blow you away. So they take her body away, and they end up coming out with a coroner report saying she died from a drug overdose.
Oh, wow.
And her family's like, you've got to be kidding me. She went to a meeting last night. What are you talking about? So then they change her death, the reason for her death. And then they cremate her body, and the family can't even see her body.
No, yeah.
We don't know what
happened. Cover the
happened.
evidence.
That's what I think. And I think the body was probably so badly bruised and swollen that they didn't want anybody to see what happened to this girl.
Her name is Boylan, her last name?
Roseanne Boylan. And
Roseanne
this one
Boylan.
girl at Gateway Pundit, Cara Castranueva, went and visited the family, put together this report on that just was, it should have been a Pulitzer Prize. It was so good. I've said that before because she talked to the family, and they're like, no, she didn't. She was a good girl. She got caught in the wrong spot, and she died that day. And instead, our media will say that 5 cops died that day, which is a total lie.
Not true. Yeah.
None of them died. 4 Trump supporters died that day, and they never talk about that. They never
Isn't
say
that interesting? If you can control the media, you can control the people to a certain extent because the people are looking to the media. Has anyone, this is on video too, what happened to
Roseanne? There's pieces of it. Yeah. And it came out time later. And here's again, getting back to this, Patrick, they have this January 6th committee, and they destroy half the evidence.
Yeah.
Again, that's
and are allowed to get away with it.
Prison. They should be in prison.
It's so backwards. So backwards.
And that's the same thing with the election. You don't let us in. We can't see the in Georgia, we found this out. 1.7 million voter images are gone. They're not there. They're not in existence. How can you prove the results when they're not there? That's one of the things that has to be there. We found out in Fulton County, which is Atlanta, that there was absolutely no voter signatures that were checked. So they're going to tell us all, this is in my second book.
Yeah.
There's a chapter on the ballots. It's like, we don't know who they came from. We don't know where they came from. There's no chain of custody. How can we sign off on this?
Right.
Well, we can't.
Destroying evidence obviously is a crime.
Yeah.
Hey, that's like kindergarten stuff.
Yeah.
And these people are hiding and destroying evidence left and right. A lot of them should be in prison, obviously.
A lot of them severely, though. In my opinion, is if you're part of a FBI or DOJ, you're held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
If you commit a crime, you should be put to a much higher penalty, because we need good people of integrity in these positions.
We do.
We don't have them.
Okay. So let me, because our time is short here. So I want to make sure that we,
well, Patrick, why don't we do this? If you'd like, invite me back and we can talk more about the election and stuff.
Yes. Because I want to do a whole thing on solutions too.
Great. Let's do that.
And you've kind of laid out a lot in today's show, and we'll leave it at that for today. And I thank you so much for your time. And again, it's joehoft.com. Joe, I appreciate your time. I appreciate and I want to talk to you next time too about, you wrote a book as well on, you called it Loving, Blessing, and Being Aware of God's Grace, which is a whole nother side of you. So I want to bring that in as well, but I want to talk about solutions. And thank you for laying all this out. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being with us. I have a great amount of admiration for you and your brother.
Thanks.
And others who are out there actually doing the work every day. And I'm just honored to meet you. I really am.
Appreciate it, Patrick.
God bless you, and may He continue to bless you.
Thank you. Thanks. Same with you.